It's Friday, January 13th, 2017. That's right. Friday the 13th, folks. This is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken Press and Raging Chicken Media. Each week, I talk to our capital muckraker-in-chief, Sean Kitchen, about the good, the bad, and the ugly in state and national politics. Well, on today's show, we'll talk about Sean's piece. Well, Sean, we'll talk about PA Senator Scott Wagner's official announcement that he's in the game, folks, for the 2018 gubernatorial race. And Sean Kitchen was at the event. He was there, but he didn't get to hear what Wagner had to say. Why? Well, he was booted from the event. Yep, got it right there in a Facebook live stream too, folks. So Sean joined members of SEIU outside the walls of Wagner's trash Emporium, who were there to protest Wagner's anti-worker agenda. Plus, we'll look back at this week's GOP vote-a-rama. They actually call them these things, folks. Vote-a-rama. And that vote-a-rama was to start the process of repealing Obamacare. Trump says yes, but Republicans are getting a little nervous about the pushback they are already feeling from constituents. And during the wee hours of that vote-a-rama, PA Senator Bob Casey and 12 other Democrats, including New Jersey's own Cory Booker, they joined the Republican majority to shoot down a Bernie Sanders and Amy Klobuchar amendment that would have allowed the importation of prescription drugs from Canada. That's important because, of course, that's extraordinarily cheaper, right? Because of the way that Canada negotiates with Big Pharma. So Big Pharma strikes again. And we got some comments back, and I had an article up on that, and we got some comments back on Facebook, and taking issue with targeting some of these Democrats, and so we'll talk a little about that in the second part, too, as well. And this Sunday, January 15th, is the National Day of Action to Save Healthcare, and events are happening all over the country. We mentioned this a little bit last week, that our revolution was gearing up, and they're calling this our first big stand. Several other organizations like the PCCC, that's the Progressive Change Campaign Committee, are kind of co-hosting these events all over the country. And in PA, the major event will be taking place down in Philly, but there's other smaller ones around the state, so we'll get into that a bit. And then we're also going to talk a little about the media's persistent focus on the lack of expertise and understanding and credentials in the Trump administration. And from my perspective, they're missing the point that the incoming administration is about naked power. And we have a media structure that lacks the practice in taking on that power. All that and more in today's show. And today's show is brought to you by, you, our members, and your contributors and your listeners that are out there. I would like to thank, we had a really good membership move at the end of 2016. We had a number of members join on, got like 15 or 17 members join on. And that has made it possible for us to begin paying our writers over Raging Chicken Press and so on. So I want to say thank you to all our new members, and especially those members who've been with us right from the beginning for 5 years. Now, if you would like to become a member of Raging Chicken, it's pretty simple. You just go to ragingchickenpress.org. You click on the support and membership tab. You can become a member for as little as $5 a month. If you go to that support and membership tab, you can click on become a member right there. And that'll take you to our membership page, talk about some rewards we have there. We're also on that same tab. You can also click on our Patreon button. We are now on Patreon too as well. So if you're someone that kind of supports people through Patreon, you can click on that. You can support us through Patreon. Or if you're not ready to become a member, or you just want to give us a one-time donation, under that same support and membership tab, you just click on boom, donate, and slip us a donation and help us out. So Sean, you had a pretty eventful week, it sounds like, out there in trash land.
Yes, it was really fun. I woke up really early, like 5:30 in the morning early on Wednesday to get down to York, Pennsylvania, just to see Senator Wagner announce his official launch for Governor 2018.
Yeah, so this is the big announcement that everybody's been waiting for, and he's been teasing on Twitter about, huh?
Yep, the helicopter was there. He flew in on his helicopter, flew out in the helicopter. But one thing I was not able to see him give his big old grand announcement.
Too many tall people in the room?
Yeah, too many steps in there. To a few people who did not appreciate what I wrote over the past month and a half, we're in the room and were able to spot me real easily. And they asked me to leave within 3 minutes of getting into the building. Funny thing is, I went up to the Penn Live reporter that was there, Jan Murphy, and I asked her, looked at her, I was like, Jan, she looked at me and I was like, how long until I get kicked out? And she started laughing. We all knew it was coming.
Yeah, so I mean, so you got into the event, and I thought that the greatest part about the whole thing was that you caught the getting booted out on a Facebook live stream.
I didn't put it on live stream. I took the video on my phone. Like I was always.
Oh, you just took the video. I thought that was live up there. You had the video on your phone.
No. I did the live stream outside with some of the protesters from SEIU 668, laid off workers actually that were there, employment compensation workers, but. When I was getting thrown out, I just took out my cell phone. Like, really? You're kicking me out? You're kicking me out? Really? Like, good. Why? Because I'm on the invited press list. And then we had a little bit of a back and forth. And the one person who is Jason High, who is Senator Wagner's chief of staff. I don't know if he's leaving that position to do anything with the campaign yet. But he was trying to tell us to stop RCPing and then also calling us special interest Democrat media. So. Yeah,
whatever. Whatever. Special interest. Yeah, that's how they're doing it. Well, it's interesting to see that you're from his very first campaign announcement, you're already seeing some attempts at control of the press, right? To limiting access to those events, about who can report on it and so on. And, I thought that for that alone, it was important that you got even the video of that to let people know, look, this guy, this is how he's going to proceed. And, I also think that it's telling that, for those of you who are listening to this who don't know State Senator Scott Wagner, he's known as that helicopter senator because he has a helicopter and he flies around, right? And this is kind of how he decides to make policy, apparently, from whatever 1,000 feet up or however high that thing goes, looking down on everybody else about the world. And so it was kind of fitting for him to come in on that helicopter, so again, limiting access to the press and so on. And his policies deserve to be pressured. I mean, so when you talk to these folks outside with the SEIU folks, what kind of issues were they bringing forward? I mean, these are people from the call centers?
Yes, these were people who were working at the call centers. There's a bunch of them there. I actually talked to one of them, talked to a few, but I interviewed one for the story for the protest, and she was a supervisor. She's there for 16 years. She started out as one of the people who were interviewers, people who would actually take the phone calls and actually had to process the claims, and people who had to tell, unemployed people if they were eligible or not for those benefits. These are people who, made those call centers run, and she worked her way up to supervisor, and she ended up getting caught up in the layoffs. We were talking about how she felt with Scott Wagner having another senator, John Michael Berger, hand out $150 cash to employees outside the Altoona call center. She said it was a slap in the face. She said it was embarrassing. Well, it can get me like one bill, not even a month's or nowhere near a month's rent. She's like, what, maybe like some insurance payment or something like that. Our costs are going up. We're out of a job, and here he is handing us out $150.
Right, and my understanding too, as well, is that you had that story about the handing out of the money, $150 to these employees and some of the background, and you have written about what's been happening in the call centers. And these are call centers that not just out in Altoona, but all over the state, if I'm understanding it right.
Right. So these were 3 call centers that closed down of the state's 9: Altoona, Lancaster, and Allentown centers closed. And then there was a 4th call center involved, that was Harrisburg, where they lost most of their staff. So essentially 3 call centers were shut down. A 4th one was severely understaffed because of these cuts. And now people are experiencing long lines, long wait times, long wait times on the phones, and long times at the career links, which is sort of like a public-private thing that the state is in. And now the career links are getting jammed with people who are unemployed and can't get through the call centers. And the people who are trying to get called through the call centers are now waiting 2 or 3 hours or calling days in a row just trying to get through.
Yeah, and these folks and these union members, these employees, I mean, they basically lay the blames right at Scott Wagner's feet, right?
Right. They basically, so the way the timeline breaks down is pretty interesting. On November 17th, which is the last session day of the year, this bill was supposed to be voted on the Senate floor. Senator Wagner brags about getting this bill stopped. He got the bill pulled from the floor.
So when you say this bill, what was the bill supposed to do?
It was supposed to fund the unemployment call centers for the next 4 years.
So if that bill had proceeded and got voted on and got passed, then these call centers would have been
kept open,
up and running. Yeah.
Yeah. This bill was agreed upon to all four caucuses, leaders of all four caucuses, and the governor's office. Passed the House with only 10 people voting against it. And Senator Wagner did not vote on the bill either time it went through his committee. So then on the last day of the year, he got Senator Corman or someone else in leadership to not have the bill not be voted on the Senate floor, which was November 17th. And then he took credit for that, right? Then on November 19th and 20th, Senator Wagner is down in Florida having lunch with Betsy DeVos at the Republican Governors Association. Makes it, kind of interesting to wonder what his thinking was going into that. Here I am kicking a union in the shins to pander to someone like Betsy DeVos 2 days later while I'm having lunch with her. It makes you wonder those type of questions, like the timeline in general.
Well, and that's fascinating because you also have, so it's basically he gets to claim that he did this at the same time.
He's saying it's not his fault, it's Governor Wolf's fault. And then he's having lunch with Betsy DeVos. At the campaign event, right, he told reporters that there was only 300 workers that were laid off. And then that 500 number is a fictitious number coming from Governor Wolf's office, when 520 people actually lost their jobs. And
so you know what? Maybe he'll take on more of that Trump mantle pretty soon, and he'll start claiming that those 300 people who lost their jobs, that's actually a lie. What the truth is that he saved 300 jobs, right? That's probably what we'll get next.
That's where we're going with this. Yeah. Yes.
Man, pretty crazy. I also saw this week, since we're on the Wagner tip right now, so you've got this announcement, and he seems to be tying himself pretty directly to this incoming Trump administration.
Yeah, he is. He's tying an anchor around his feet. He has been going around making statements like Trump, saying we need to drain the swamp. Referring to the Capitol building. He set up his campaign set up a fundraising page with T-shirts that said "Trump is my president," and also shirts that said "Make Pennsylvania Great Again."
Yeah, I think he tweeted something out like that too as well.
Yes, so he's using the Trump rhetoric front and center, and he has no problems doing that.
Well, man, I can't underscore enough how important it is that we keep on tracking this guy, especially if you put this in a bigger context, right? I mean, part of the argument is about how Trump won was because of Pennsylvania, right? Was because of the dynamics here in Pennsylvania, and that makes it all the more important that we break those dynamics as soon as possible.
So I got a couple things coming up with, actually, we're going to be doing with Scott Wagner later on down the bit. And one of the things I'm going to be doing is making the argument that comparing him to Donald Trump is really a dangerous argument. It's a dangerous argument. I think, in my opinion, it's a dumb argument. Yes, he is like Donald Trump. He is a millionaire. He is an activist, and he has spent his money, and now he's running for governor. I think the more appropriate arguments is to link him to your Rust Belt governors like Matt Bevin, like Rick Snyder, like Scott Walker. I think those are the people he needs to be linked to more than Donald Trump. Yes, it's easy pinning someone to Donald Trump who is, a buffoon, but Scott Wagner is actually really smart. He's really dangerous, and he's more along the lines of these Republican governors who have turned their states from Democratic strongholds, union strongholds, to Republican right-to-work states. And now, in those states, we're critical in giving Trump the Electoral College vote.
I think that's real. I think you're totally on point. I think you're totally on point. I think that's an excellent argument. I think that's where people have got to have their attention. And I think that you and I have talked a little bit about this too as well. We're on the phone the other day talking exactly about this issue, that this is a playbook that is well established, right? I mean, we have now almost a decade, right? Kind of coming up of watching this unfold. And right-wing politics, and that the media seems to be making the exact same mistakes that they did last time. I mean, I know Jan Murphy; she's a great reporter, but she did that that profile piece on Wagner, right? And you see some of the other media kind of look at this stuff as, again, this is just your everyday guy. He's got some concerns. Yes, he's conservative, but this is his story about coming up and so on. And I think we need to put him in that in that framework. My only point about not comparing him to Trump, I would actually take issue with two things. There is, number one, I'm not in the camp of thinking Trump is a buffoon. I don't. right? And we'll talk about this in the second segment. He's not the, in the kind of elite, kind of the ways we think about policy and all that kind of stuff. I'll give anybody that. But I think it's dangerous that we even talk about Trump as a buffoon and so on. So we'll come back to the segment about how the media's cover him. So that's number one. But number two, what is interesting to me, right, about the ties to Trump, right, is not so much that, he is just like Trump, right? But if you look at the people that are being assembled in the Trump administration, right, and the ties to those deep pockets money, right, the ties to that kind of Republican playbook and so on, you've got Wagner jumping right into that same thing. With Betsy DeVos is only the most obvious one in the kind of almost obvious connection right off the bat. But what is disturbing to me is that he's willing to use and to draw upon the Trump rhetoric, right, to try to keep those, those people that voted for Trump mobilized in Pennsylvania to stay on board at least through 2018. That has implications not just for Pennsylvania, but also for national politics in terms of where Pennsylvania fits into that.
Yeah, and one of the things, I mean, Wagner is very smart. Wagner is not. And do I think Wagner has more in line with a Trump voter than, say, like someone with Scott Walker? Absolutely not. I think Wagner is more along the lines of a Scott Walker person, but he's smart enough to use the rhetoric and to co-opt the fervor from the Trump people to bring them along for 2018, which I don't think that is that hard of a thing to do. But in the Republican primary, he's going to be the first one catering to them or pandering to them. And, he's going to get out in front of that vote. And who else is going to come around and flank Wagner from the right if they're looking for the most conservative person possible?
Exactly. And what I fear is going to happen, right? And this is why that his use of that, not fear, I don't fear it, I expect this to happen. He's going to use the same kind of similar kind of playbook that we saw with Trump, right? Is that by utilizing that rhetoric to kind of keep these folks mobilized, right? Especially getting behind him and kind of the lead up to the 2018 election. And that the media, right, is going to focus on that stuff. And right? They're going to focus on the Trump voter. They're going to focus on that kind of fuck, and they will not do the kind of work that you're starting to do here. They will not draw those connections to those other state governors.
And one of the things that he's already doing is he's already using that disinformation playbook with the media. Scott Wagner is, like as he's getting interviewed after getting introduced by or doing his inaugural thing, he's speaking to the media afterwards, and he's like, well, what about the 520 employees that are laid off? He's like, no, 300. And the lady's like, no, 500. He's like, no, it's 300. Are you seriously saying that the governor's lying? He's like, yes, 520, 600 people that got laid off. Like, well, those are the numbers.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
But then he's trying to pick straws, saying, well, it was really 300 people, but those extras are just casualties from, from Wolf and everything. And where, no, those people can be collateral damage, because if you're a supervisor of, 80 people who just got laid off, that supervisor is going to go with them.
Right.
So we don't like you have a bunch of call center employees that were laid off, but there's also a bunch of supervisors that were laid off too.
Right. Now, I think this is the perfect example of where, what journalists should be doing, what the media should be doing then is like, okay, let's get the hard numbers. Let's look at the numbers of people that were actually working. So it's not just like, well, Wolf says this and Wagner says this. What is true? It seems like that should be the work of the journalist, right? To do that kind of research to kind of show and demonstrate those numbers. Right. I mean, that would be the kind of the thing that would make sense. But
and one more thing I want to add before we move on to the next segment is there were also some crazy conservatives in the room that day. There was a guy, Loman Henry, who runs the Lincoln Institute that was there.
That's why. Okay. He runs the Lincoln Institute.
Yes. And also there's a picture floating around of Senator Wagner giving a one-handed hug standing next to our good old friend Matt Briette from the Commonwealth Foundation. Again, another ALEC linked organization, but no one seems to care about that because he's Matt Briette, and Matt Briette lives on the West Shore, and he knows all the journalists, and the journalists aren't going to call him out for being a special interest guru on the right. Well,
and he just set up and Briette he's down in Philly now, right? Isn't he associated now with that Freedom Center or whatever the hell it's called?
No, he does stuff for them. He actually opened up a new organization in the Harrisburg area, I think in the same strip of properties with Citizens Alliance Pennsylvania and Americans for Prosperity, that is a 501c4 or something else, a C6 or something like that. So he set up a different organization, and he's actually out of the Commonwealth. I think he just sits on the board of directors at the Fairness Center.
What's the Fairness? He's the board of directors of the Fairness
Yeah,
Center.
he's just a board member.
Well, and I bring that up especially because I know there's those points of connection. Is that so? Now you're seeing these organizations that were influential in the kind of right wing PA politics. These institutions that were connected and so on, and now they've multiplied. They're like a succulent plant. They've got those little babies, and now they're picking them off and kind of planting the roots elsewhere. We're seeing the proliferation of these organizations, and that is kind of going to be even more of a challenge for kind of the traditional media structure, because what they're going to be citing these people. Well, here's someone from the Fairness Center. Here's someone from the Commonwealth Foundation. Here's someone from blah blah blah, from all these different names, but essentially they're part of the same exactly network with the same agenda. So we're running right up to our break. When we come back after this, we're going to talk a little bit about the Republican vote-a-rama and our good old PA Senator Bob Casey joining with Republicans to shoot down a Bernie Sanders and Amy Klobuchar amendment, and a little bit about some of our kind of media culture. So this is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to Raging Chicken's Out to Coop podcast. So when we were breaking off for the break, Sean and I were kind of talking a little about Senator Wagner's connections and so on. What Sean and I were just talking about on the break there was going to put together a little list of all these organizations in Pennsylvania that are kind of networked as part of this kind of right-wing austerity shock doctrine network that is operating here in Pennsylvania. We'll have that up on Raging Chicken Press coming soon. So one of the other big stories of the week was the GOP, the Republican out in D.C., the Republican vote-a-rama that was basically setting the stage for the repeal of Obamacare. And it was kind of fascinating to watch. I mean, one thing we haven't talked about, I mean, and that happened right before the vote-a-rama, was the craziness of these confirmation hearings that have been taking place in D.C. too as well. I mean, you have Jeff Sessions going through, the Rex Tillerson, the ExxonMobil guy who's going to be for Secretary of State, Betsy DeVos. She's been put off, I guess, until the 17th. For reasons that are unclear. Could be potentially that she hasn't all her FBI clearance in. It could be they're starting to get a little nervous at some of the pushback. We're not exactly clear about that. But it's been a huge, huge week in kind of national news, and almost impossible to cover. You had Obama's farewell address this week, or Biden being given the Presidential Medal of Freedom, all this kind of stuff. And what's been slipping through some of the cracks is, what's happening kind of behind the scenes to position the incoming legislature to really wreak havoc as some of, kind of really important foundations of, the public and the commons. And so what took place then in this vote-a-rama, Republican vote-a-rama, was basically putting together these budget provisions that would strip Obamacare, right? Strip the Affordable Care Act of some of its funding procedures. Because, say, for example, the ACA depends upon subsidies from the government to insurance companies to cover those kind of, people with pre-existing conditions, some of the riskier investments when it comes to coverage of healthcare. It also provides for the expansions of Medicaid in states that decided to move that forward. So if the Republicans move forward through this process of reconciliation to basically strip away the funding for mechanisms of the Affordable Care Act, the Affordable Care Act effectively collapses. So that alone is remarkable. They're setting the stage for that. And I know, Sean, you brought this up before, is that this directly affects you. I mean, you were able to kind of get coverage on the Affordable Care Act, right?
Yeah, I was able to get coverage through the Medicaid expansion that Governor Wolf had a couple, I guess, like last year now, 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. So I was able to actually get covered for that for the first time in forever.
Yeah, and here you go. This is a Pennsylvania originally resisted that Medicaid expansion, but Governor Wolf, finally after he was elected, he comes in, and that was one of the things he really pushed hard for and was able to make that happen. If the Republicans in Washington are able to move this through, and again, look, they have majorities in both the House and the Senate. Trump has been pushing on Twitter and elsewhere to get this done. Right. But it looks like that some Republicans are getting more and more nervous about some of the pushback they're getting from constituents and so on.
Yeah,
Go ahead. Sorry.
It's going to be really interesting to see what happens because the Republicans and Trump don't have a mandate to really do much. I mean, Trump's going to go into office one of the lowest approval ratings of any president ever, like in the 30s, almost like 30-some%.
Right.
He's starting off at like George Bush level bad numbers. Like, like he's starting off at like George Bush bad. George Bush went in, or at least at like a 65-70% approval rating before he screwed things up. Now Trump's just going in there at some of the worst levels that George Bush was at, and they think they have a mandate to do this stuff. And really, they're starting to find out they really don't have a mandate to do this stuff because people don't want to see their health care gone. Like they don't want that. Yeah.
Imagine that.
I know people don't like seeing things getting taken away from them.
I don't know why, it just doesn't make sense. It's kind of like, a reverse Santa Claus, if you will.
Yeah.
And keeping that Christmas spirit going and all that stuff. I don't know.
We have many more bad names for that, but yeah, that's a good one. That's a safe one to use.
Yeah, whatever. But no, so I mean, I say that only, to set that up and to see that's coming down the pike because this could be potentially really bad. And it was fascinating this past week to see that, beginning, God, it was probably in the lead up to this. What the Republicans were proposing basically initially was this kind of repeal and delay. Let's say just going to repeal Obamacare. They were going to kind of wait for some time and say it's not going to disappear for right away and so on. So we'll get to it eventually, right? Which, of course, is seriously problematic because as lots of people have been pointing out, if you're sitting there and you're part of the insurance companies, and remember, the ACA is dependent on private insurers, right? Unless the states pick up a state exchange or something like this, it's private insurers that are doing this. And if they see that the funding is being pulled away and they're repealing it, there's no more incentive, right? Or there's no more mandate that everyone has to sign up for insurance, and there's no funding to subsidize their work. Those insurance companies are going to pull out it's faster than you can say repeal Obamacare, right? So they're going to start pulling away, and people are going to start losing their coverage because these insurance companies are going to opt out of the whole system, right? That's how it all held together. And so Senator Tom Cotton from Arkansas, he was one of the people that was out there saying, "Hey, wait a minute, not so fast on this, getting rid of the Medicaid expansion thing. There's a lot of people in my state that are benefiting from that." He doesn't say it exactly like that, but he knows
there's a lot of people in your state benefiting from other government handouts as well.
Exactly, right? I mean, same thing with Rand Paul out there in Kentucky. I mean, people in Kentucky are, but Kentucky and Arkansas have been some of the greatest beneficiaries of the ACA, of Obamacare, and they are the ones who are slated to going to lose their coverage. And what's been fascinating to watch is that that the right-wing media has been so effective in saying Obamacare is over here and the Affordable Care Act's over here, and to slowly pull these things apart. So there's people that are sitting there defending the Affordable Care Act, right? These kind of right-wing voters defending the Affordable Care Act, saying, yes, let's get rid of Obamacare, right? Because they've been split. It's kind of like the same thing as like, there's the people from over there in Afghanistan, Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, they attacked us in New York, so let's attack Iraq, right? Afghanistan, Al-Qaeda, Iraq. Again, putting these things together in such a way that people make the associations. And here they dissociated the Affordable Care Act from Obamacare. So there's a lot of people that are saying, yeah, I finally have coverage, but we're going to get rid of that bad thing called Obamacare so that, I can keep my coverage and keep costs down. That's not what's going to happen. They're going to lose their coverage. So in states like Kentucky and Arkansas and so on, what they're facing is that, those politicians are facing, they know there's going to be a huge pushback from their constituents. Rand Paul has come out and talked about how if you repeal Obamacare, it's going to be a huge cost to the government, right, to taxpayers. And so he's been pushing back too as well. It's because part of it's because they're constituents, and part of it is because of their ideology. So now they've been slowly moving in this direction of, no, we're going to put something together to replace it right away, right? And that's actually those flames are being fanned by Trump too as well. But their plans, nobody's seen them. They've had 6, 8, 10 years to come up with these plans, and they haven't done it. So we don't know what they are, but they all seem to be moving in the direction of say, yeah, you might have coverage, but you're going to have enormous deductibles, right? And you're going to have very, very little coverage. It's unclear about whether pre-existing conditions will be covered. A whole range of things that are just really, really, really bad. And that's what seems to be coming down the pike. And I know it's going to have effects here in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I mean, there's some 600,000 people on Medicare or Medicaid in Pennsylvania, so it's going to be interesting seeing what happens. That's for sure.
So let me ask you about this. So now we should be clear. This whole process of reconciliation that they're trying to push forward, and a bunch of other garbage that they were doing in their vote-a-rama stuff. So I'm curious about your take about this. So Bernie Sanders and Amy Klobuchar, Democrats basically tried to kind of pass a bunch of amendments as part of this budget reconciliation process in the Senate that basically would have lessened the impact of a repeal of Obamacare. So, for example, there was an amendment that was offered to try to preserve the protection for pre-existing conditions, right? That failed, right? Everything largely on party lines, right? Republicans said, no, we're not going to do that. Democrats said, yes, we should do this, but the amendment fails. The notable exception was this one being offered by Bernie Sanders and Amy Klobuchar. And that was to allow for the importation of prescription drugs from Canada. Why? Because prescription drugs in Canada are much, much, much cheaper. Why? Because the Canadian government negotiates directly with the drug companies, right? So because they're a huge buyer, right? And you have a national, you have everyone's covered under kind of a single payer system. They're able to negotiate better prices for those drugs. And so that was the amendment that was put forward by Sanders and Klobuchar. You had 14, I guess, Republicans vote for the amendment, right? Which you're like, oh my God, so it passed? So that's going to happen? No. Why? Because you had 13 Democrats who voted against it, right? So you have and that one of those Democrats includes Pennsylvania's own Bob Casey, right? And they voted against the importing prescription drugs from Canada in order to defeat that amendment. Right, Cory Booker was another notable one because he's been praised by a lot of people over this past week for his testimony against Jeff Sessions. But then 2 days down the road, here, what's he doing? Right, he's defeating a Bernie Sanders, Amy Klobuchar amendment. So I'm curious your take on all that.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've been engaged with ACA and healthcare policy. It's one of those really weedy issues. It takes a lot of time consuming energy to actually get around, wrap your brain around it. But yeah, here we go. We're back at this again. We're back at square one more time. And now we have, these are issues we were fighting in 2008 and 2009. And clearly the party hasn't come around on this. Our party has not come around on this. And we're back at square one again.
Well, I'm interested because this is, for me, you're right about the weediness of Medicare stuff, and this is one of the problems of the ACA from the beginning, right? Instead of going single payer, which makes everything simpler, this is this really complicated system, and how you get into all the particulars is tough, definitely. However, what I was interested in primarily was, and the article that I posted on Raging Chicken about this very short article, but was about the politics of it. That you had Senator Casey, Cory Booker, right, and 10 other Democrats, or 10, 12, or 11 other Democrats, 11 other Democrats basically voting against this. And what was fascinating about that is that if you look at Cory Booker and Senator Casey and three others of the Democrats that voted against it, two other Democrats against it, those four, they were in the top 10 of those senators who received healthy checks and healthy kind of funding from the pharmaceutical industry. So, for example, Bob Casey was number 5 on that list in terms of like $250,000 between 2010 and 2016. And I think this stuff is important, right? Because, part of what was going to have to move forward, if we're going to be able to talk about power at all, if we're going to talk about resistance at all, the resistance and fear nothing, and that's the kind of stuff we're hearing a lot on social media and so on. But what does that mean in practice? It means that they're going to have to keep the pressure upon those Democrats to as well to kind of, close ranks and kind of operate as the resistance. It seems right now you're getting more and more of these Democrats, these conservative Democrats, that seem to be, be willing to kind of, go both ways, depending on which way the money is flowing. So I don't know. So anyways, I posted this piece, and what was interesting to me, and I just want to kind of address this quickly, and I want to talk a little about the media in a second, but I want to address this quickly because we had posted this piece called PA Senator Bob Casey sides with Republicans to keep prescription drug prices high. And, when it got posted to our Facebook, we had this one guy who posted a response to this saying that, Casey had responded on Reddit to basically say, hey, look, the reason why I voted against that amendment was because there was not safety protections to ensure the safety of the incoming prescription drugs. A different amendment was being offered that you have to clear the safety credentials, something like that, first before it came in. I voted for that one instead. Okay, and so he posted that, and then I posted a response to that. It was this really excellent article that was up in the Intercept by David Dayan and Zaya Jelani. It's called Cory Booker joins Senate Republicans to kill measure to import cheaper medicine from Canada. And in that, one of the things that they track in here is that this argument being put forward by Senator Casey is on Reddit. It was posted here. This is basically the line that these senators who take big money from big pharma use. And so, for example, from the Intercept, and I'm going to quote this, is this quote, in his statement, he's talking about Cory Booker here. In his statement to the media after the vote, Booker's office said he supports the importation of prescription drugs, but that, quote, any plan to allow the importation of prescription medication should also include consumer protections that ensure foreign drugs meet American safety standards. I oppose an amendment put forward last night that didn't meet that test, unquote. Now, this is Dan and Jelani again. This argument is the same as one offered by the pharmaceutical industry. The Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturing of America, Pharma, which lobbies against importation, maintains that it opposes importation because foreign governments will not ensure that prescription drugs entering the U.S. from abroad are safe and effective. The safety excuse has long been a refuge for policymakers who don't want to assist Americans struggling with prescription drug costs. Bills to legalize importation passed in 2000 and 2007, but expired after Clinton and Bush administration refused to certify that it would be safe. The Obama administration also cited safety concerns when opposing importation measures in the Affordable Care Act. So what they do in that piece in the Intercept is they track some of the history of this stuff. This is the line from Big Pharma. And what they kind of exposed in that piece was that, everything that Casey said on Reddit and everything that Booker has said in his public statements seemed to basically be, reasonable, right? You want to have safety concerns and that kind of stuff. However, what they know is that this is just a way of delaying so it never happens. That's why that was kind of important. And, I got to a little bit of pushback on Facebook on this, and in part because saying that, look, we can't split hairs. This is the wrong fight. We shouldn't be going after our own, blah, 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 right? And I get that argument. I hear it a lot. And what I think it's also our perspective, or at least my perspective on this and how we kind of look at this stuff at Raging Chicken is that, part of what we're doing here is following the money. And part of what it means is to operate as a resistance, right? That people seem to want to do means that we need to kind of be together on this. Right. And if big money from Big Pharma or whatever institution is able to peel off Democrats or peel off, quote unquote, progressives, right, then we are going to lose. Right. So then part of what the pressure back on someone like Casey or someone like Booker is not to say that, we have to go all out against them. And this is the battle to go against them. It's about saying, look, you want to be part of this progressive coalition, right? You want to position yourself, especially in Booker's case, to be a contendable or a candidate for the presidential race in 2020. Well, guess what? We are the people that were ignored in this last campaign, right? And we are the ones where the source of the power of anything on the left. So then basically you're going to have to respond to our agenda. It's about slowly peeling these people away from that big money, right? And orienting them back towards the people. This is not anti-Casey. This is kind of saying, Casey, you need to get on board here, right? And we think as constituents, because we believe in democracy, we believe in citizen action, that as constituents, what we need to do is we need to put pressure on our elected officials to do the right thing. So, this is going to be an ongoing issue that we're going to get. There's these squabbling on the left or so on. And I want to kind of take time in this podcast when we get these kind of responses and so on to our pieces to kind of address some of that, because I think this is part of the important kind of discussion. So, I don't know what your take is on that, Sean. This is, and I know I just kind of like went on another one of my little rants here, but I think it's important that these conversations are kind of front and center, and that we kind of pick them apart a little bit.
Yeah, we're always having these type of fights. I'm like, you can replace pharmaceutical industries, right, who have a lot of Democratic support, with the charter school movement, which also supports a lot of Democrats. Well, why are you going after this Democrat here, in this city, for supporting charter schools? We're seeing that support with people, with plutocrats who are saying shame on you Democrats for not supporting Betsy DeVos. Shut up and get in line and support her for being Department of Education secretary, even though there's big glaring interest, conflicts of interest here. A billionaire who wants to do nothing but privatize public education. So like there's those fights going on. I also remember having this type of fight back in I'm going to say June or July.
Yep.
With Hillary Clinton, saying, look at the mistake Hillary Clinton's making right here by boasting about all the Republicans who are endorsing her. All these war hawks from Pennsylvania, all these neocons, all these neoliberals, neocons, and everything on here. And one of my friends was like, "Well, we have to build a big coalition so when she wins, we can get what we want. We shouldn't try to put the Republican Party out of its misery." And look how that look where that turned out. That type of campaigning, that thinking,
Exactly.
where we have to move to the center and appease the Republicans. When
Exactly.
This wasn't that type of election, because those Republicans didn't come home and vote for Clinton. They voted for Trump.
Exactly. And I want to make a couple things clear. I think that, a few things. One, I think your example of the charter schools is a perfect illustration of what we're talking about. What it means to be kind of part of, say, progressive media, from my perspective at least, right, is what we do at Raging Chicken, is not to shill for the Democratic Party, right, but is actually to be part of a set of supporting a set of progressive principles. That includes things like public education. That includes things like low-cost access to medical care. I would say single payer is the way we should go. A whole set of policy prescriptions that are about kind of, people first, right? There's a reason why there's an organization out there, right, called People First. Is that the whole idea is that we need to be kind of like advocating for those sets of policies, right? And in fact, right now it's true that in the Democratic Party right now is where the battle is, right? Inside that party, right? Because, you want to try to build in the incoming Trump administration, potential Wagner administration, with a right wing kind of like dominated state legislators all over the country. You want to start from square one and build a brand new party? Good luck to you, right? What I think we have to do is that we have to engage in those battles within the Democratic Party too as well right now. And I know that a lot of people are going to be pissed off by that, but so be it. That's kind of where my perspective is. And part of what that means is not just kind of, walking around on eggshells every time we approach a kind of right-wing Democrat, right? But it's to hold them to task, right? It's to say that we can no longer afford a situation in which that we're going to be giving away the farm while we supposedly are the kind of progressive party. Right? Raging Chicken, right, as a media organization, right, part of what our job, I think, is to do is to follow the money, is to draw attention to these things, right, is not to kind of like paper over these kind of divisions, right, but to kind of push things in a more progressive agenda. So that's kind of where we look at it. So I have one more thing I wanted to kind of bring up, but I'm just going to touch upon it now. I've got a piece that I'm working on right now. It's kind of looking at some of the discussions around the kind of Trump administration. And I think this is going to be increasingly the case when it comes forward to Wagner. And it's been bothering me since December. And the nutshell of it is this, right, is that I can't stand the reporting that we're getting, especially on cable television, right? But it's also true in print media too, as well, to a lesser degree, is that we keep on hearing, especially when we're talking about commentators, we're talking about what the Trump administration, the problem with the Trump administration is that he's bringing in people who just don't understand, or Trump doesn't get it. You don't know if he really understands foreign policy or so on. Or look at this person, he's bringing these people in. They don't have the credentials for this. They have no experience, right? that whole idea about understanding, experience, expertise, all that kind of stuff is virtually irrelevant when it comes to trying to understand what is happening in their Trump regime. And I think that we do a disservice when we look at Trump and we just want to focus on his buffoonery as opposed to what he's actually about. From my perspective, and I'll get more to this when we get in the piece in Raging Chicken, from my perspective is basically what we're seeing right now is the assembling of raw, naked power. This is about power. It's not about expertise and understanding, right? This is about control and power. And I would really encourage people to take a listen to yesterday's Majority Report. Majority Report by Sam Cedar. It's a great podcast. They had this guy on, right? And this kind of brought a lot of my thinking into clarity. Say, yep, okay, I'm on the money. This guy, Dan Dicker. Dan Dicker was a former oil trader, right? And now he's written this book about about the oil industry and so on. And they're talking about the Rex Tillerson hearing. And what is fascinating about this, and just kind of like I said, brought everything into clarity for me too as well, is that what he looks at Rex Tillerson and says, look, you got to understand, you got all the liberals out there that are saying, look, he doesn't have this experience. He's never worked for government before. That's their concern. That's concern of people who are worried about credentials, about degrees, and what's on your resume, right? Again, what we saw that failed during the Hillary Clinton campaign. What Dan Dicker does, right, and shows what is at stake with Rex Tillerson and what's happened to the Trump administration is about the assembling of people that are just going to enact direct raw power. And that's what this is about. And we have a media structure that is basically incapable right now, right, because they're out of practice of actually investigating the lines of power. So this all by the way of coming back to you. Look at the stuff that Sean is writing right now when it comes to Senator Scott Wagner, right? That is the kind of reporting that we need. And we hope that you're also going to support us in this endeavor, because in order to kind of investigate these things, it takes time and it takes energy, but it's also looking at kind of, this is the source of things. Scott Wagner, there's going to be things that come out of his mouth that he believes or doesn't believe, right? And I could give a shit about what the hell's in the guy's heart, right? What we're looking at is the policies that he's enacting and what are the networks of power that he's connected to. And it's all part of this kind of national movement by Alex, this other kind of key billionaires and so on that are assembling it all for it. And that's where the attention needs to be. But I'm really scared, right? Or not scared. I'm afraid, I'm concerned that, or let's put it frankly, right? That's just being polite. I know, right, that our cable news and the most where people get their news are not going to cover this stuff. This is why we need your support, and this is why we're going to kind of dig into this stuff as we move forward. So anyways, we're up to a break. It went longer than I wanted to. We're going to come back. We'll do a little close up. Hopefully we'll have a couple little fun things for you. And we'll get back to it. This is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to Raging Chicken's Out the Coop podcast. So Sean, man, you know, I always get to the point where at the end of this podcast, I think I'm angrier than when I started, and I didn't think that was possible. But it just seems like there's just so much to do. You know what I mean? Yeah, no, there's a lot. We have a lot coming up, a lot cut out for us over the next couple of years now, especially with Wagner jumping in, Trumplandia coming in another week or so. Man, I'll tell you, the one thing I'm happy about though, I have to say, is that I'm finally, well, I'm not out of the woods yet, but I'm close to being out of the woods when it's become the sick. I've been sick for like 3 weeks, had some crazy virus and walking pneumonia and all this other kind of stuff. But what I know is what is at the end of that tunnel, when I get out of this tunnel, I still got those beautiful, beautiful crowlers of beer waiting for me that you gave me. So I'm very excited about that. I'm looking forward to it. And I think that, I think we have to plan a trip out there to Harrisburg at some point soon to see what's happening over at Pizza Boy too. So yeah, you definitely got to come out for that Sour Marin River. Yeah, man, believe me, I've already been thinking about it since you talked about it last week on the podcast. So we don't have a whole lot of stuff. We don't have a whole lot of new beer recommendation or anything for you today. But so Sean, kind of what's on the agenda for you? Kind of where are you looking for here? From here? I'm looking to make Scott Wagner famous. Make him famous. No, we're going to be. Stars born. I'm getting a couple pitches together for maybe trying to do some things nationally on Scott Wagner. It's part of a who's going to write about this guy nationally. No one across the state's going to pick him up, and certainly like New York Times or Washington Post isn't going to be caring about Scott Wagner until maybe the race gets closer, a month or two out. But I think it's
I think it's going to be. My goal is to make him nationally known within progressive circles around the country, and I'm going to try to sell it and start doing some of that stuff over the next few months.
Sounds good to me, man. Well, I know I have about a little over a week left out of my break. We're back in for the spring semester. I'll be out there at Kutztown and at Kutztown University, and spring semester starts on the 23rd, I think it is. And the one good thing, I'm looking forward to it this year, is that this semester coming up in spring, I'm teaching a class called Activist Writing Media. And we're going to be looking into, some of the tools for kind of citizen media, what it looks like to do investigative work and so on. I'm excited. I got these couple really cool books. One is called Media and Social Justice, and it's edited by Sue Curry Jansen, Jefferson Pooley, and Laura Taub Pervizpur, I think is how you say her name. But it's kind of a cool book, and Media and Social Justice. What's really cool about this, I didn't realize this at first, but as I began reading it, kind of going through it, preparing for the class, I really like this. All these folks are located at Muhlenberg College, which is right in Allentown, PA. So hopefully we're going to be able to get them on one of our podcasts at some point down the road. So I'm going to be looking at that book, and there's other great book just published. It's called By Any Media Necessary: The New Youth Activism, right? Very, very cool book. That will be looking into, just some of the ways that kind of young folks in particular are utilizing media in order to kind of get their voices out. So I look forward to that, and the spring semester is coming on. And also it's, budget time is like right around the corner. We're going to start hearing Tom Wolf's budget address, and the proposals that come out there. We're going to be in full swing pretty soon. And I'm sure that's going to be keeping you busy out there too in Harrisburg.
Yeah, I think it's only a couple weeks away. I don't know if it falls on Groundhog's Day this year. What's Groundhog's Day? Second day? Or
I don't know. I'm not from Pennsylvania, so we never paid attention to this stuff in New York.
Well, Groundhog's Day, it is a national holiday in Pennsylvania. You do not mess with Groundhog's Day. But it looks like Groundhog's Day will not be the same day as Budget Day, which last year they had to push the budget back a whole week just because of Groundhog's Day.
Great. It's beautiful.
If there's one thing that could stop a budget, it's a holiday about some rattan with a long furry tail. So it's Groundhog's Day. The budget's going to be in the first Tuesday of February. So it looks like February 7th is going to be the budget day. And that's usually a fun day to be in the Capitol. It's when the media just flocks to the Capitol and people are just yelling at each other. And Governor Wolf made things a little interesting last year by dressing down the legislature.
Yeah, I'll say that was one of my most favorite. It was one of my most favorite pieces of like political like performance that I saw. I couldn't believe. I was like sitting like, oh my God, is he actually doing this? It's unbelievable. But then it was also followed by the kind of worst political organizing around that I had ever seen too as well. So it's like, here you go. And then now he's out there on his own. And all the Democrats just kind of like ran for cover. Like, don't hit me, don't hit me.
It's exactly what the Democrats are good at doing in Pennsylvania. They're running for cover.
Yeah, well, we'll see. We'll see if they're going to kind of get a spine this year or if we're going to get more of the same. So, Sean, man, I wish you a good week. And I guess we'll see you next week.
I'll see you next Friday. Yeah, it's good. Have fun. Enjoy that beer.
Yeah, I can't wait, man. Once I stop sneezing and coughing, then I'll be all set. All right, this is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken. This has been Out the Coop podcast for January the 13th, and it is Friday the 13th. We wish all of you well, and we'll see you again here next week. See ya. All right, cool.